The queue number I was given was 83. I stood in the intake corridor of Union Transit Medical Registry Station Orval 7 and looked at the paper slip in my hand. It was pale yellow. The number had been printed in the dark, blocky font the Union used for everything from ration cards to death notifications, and the paper smelled faintly of the thermal printer it had come from, a warm, almost chemical smell that I associated, after 11 years, with the particular bureaucratic indignity of being processed. I was good at being processed. I had learned to fold myself into the shape the forms required. The corridor was long and beige, not a warm beige, not the beige of old cloth or dried grass. The beige of something that had never been a color at all, that had simply arrived at its current state through institutional fatigue. The lighting was overhead panels, diffuse and even, the kind of light designed to eliminate shadow and in doing so eliminate comfort. There were 37 chairs along one wall. I counted them. 21 were occupied. 4 Velshari families with their translucent carry cases stacked at their feet. A cluster of Ivhari men in transit work clothes, their ember-amber skin darkened at the edges with station grit. 2 Drelvoth officers in civilian clothes so civilian they almost ached with the effort, and a scattering of humans in various states of waiting patience, most of them looking at the small personal screens they carried everywhere. None of them looked at me. This was not unusual. I found a seat at the end of the row, chair 37, by the far wall, and I held my yellow slip and I waited. My name is Cyril Onveth. 11 years ago, I was the third-ranked succession candidate of the Velrith Compact's Eastern Line, daughter of the Second Reach Queen, heir presumptive to the Onveth seat that had existed for 412 years. The Velrith are a winged species, our royal caste more so than our laboring caste, the wing anchors denser, the membrane span broader, the flight capability bound by ancient compact charter to succession eligibility. You cannot hold an on seat without the wings to carry the formal ascent on the day of recognition. It is lost so old no one remembers who wrote it. 11 years ago, the succession compact ruled that my wings had been surgically clipped in a procedure I did not remember and could not verify, and that I was therefore flight-incapable and succession ineligible, and that the Onveth seat would pass to the next eligible candidate, my cousin Rael Onseith, who had considerably better relationships with the Compact's senior council members than I did. The ruling came with a clip record signed by a medical officer I had never met, for a procedure performed at a Compact clinic I had never visited 18 months before the ruling was issued. I had filed 3 objections. The first was lost in processing. The second was returned stamped outside remit. The third was acknowledged, reviewed, and dismissed in 11 days, the minimum review window. I had filed them myself, without a legal delegate, because legal delegates cost money I did not have after the Compact had suspended my line stipends pending succession resolution, and the succession resolution had been concluded against me before I could save enough to retain one. After that, I had left Velrith space. I had spent 11 years as what the Compact's transit records designated a clipped national, a Velrith citizen with a flight-incapable notation on my biometric file, stripped of succession status, classified for transit purposes in the same general tier as non-royal Velrith immigrants and second-caste labor migrants. I had worked. I had been careful. I had filed my transit renewals every 18 months at whatever union processing station my work posting put me nearest, and I had presented my file, and I had watched the processing clerks mark the clipped national notation without comment, and send me on my way with a stamped renewal and a new yellow slip for the next time. I had grown expert at not looking at the space between my shoulder blades, where the wing anchors pressed flat and quiet against my back. I had grown expert, too, at choosing seats at the end of rows. Number 83 was called at 11:42. I walked to booth 7. The man in booth 7 was human. He was perhaps 47 years old, perhaps slightly older. It was difficult to place precisely, because he had the kind of face that had arrived at a particular weathered steadiness and seemed unlikely to change much further in either direction. His hair was dark with gray at the temples, cut short and practical. He wore the standard Union Registry uniform, pale gray with a station patch on the shoulder, and it fit him the way such things fit people who have worn them for a long time, which is to say comfortably, but without distinction. He had a small pair of reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead, the old-fashioned kind with thin wire frames, and they sat there slightly crooked, as though they had been pushed up in a hurry some time ago and forgotten. He was looking at his terminal when I sat down. "Transit renewal," he said without looking up. "Yes." He held out his hand for my documentation. I passed it across the counter, my transit card, my biometric confirmation chip, and the renewal application form I had completed in the intake corridor. He took them without ceremony and began entering the data into his terminal, and I watched the side of his face and waited. Processing clerks, in my experience, took between 4 and 7 minutes. They entered the data, pulled the file, confirmed the notation, stamped the renewal, and returned everything across the counter. The whole interaction was designed to require as little human judgment as possible, which was sensible, because the records themselves were supposed to carry the weight of institutional memory so that the clerk did not have to. This was not, in my experience, a job that attracted people inclined to question what the records said. At 3 minutes and 20 seconds, the man, I had not asked his name. One did not typically ask the name of a processing clerk, stopped typing. He did not say anything, he simply stopped. He looked at the screen. He looked at it for a moment that was longer than the pauses that usually indicated a simple data query. Then he pulled the reading glasses down from his forehead and put them on, and looked at the screen again. "Velrith," he said without looking at me. "Yes." "Onveth line." Something old and careful moved in my chest. "That is in the file." "It is." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm running a secondary scan. The biometric chip triggers a baseline comparison when the file shows a wing modification notation. It's standard, just takes a few minutes." I said nothing. Secondary scans were routine. I had been through them before. They confirmed the clip record. They always confirmed the clip record. He turned to a secondary panel to his right, an older scanner interface, the kind that took a physical placement rather than a chip read. "I'll need you to unfold your wings to their natural resting position." I looked at him. "Not flight extension," he said. He was still looking at the panel, adjusting a calibration dial. "Just resting position. The scan is measuring anchor density, not span." Slowly, I let my wings open to the position they held when I was not actively compressing them. The position I held only in private, only in rooms I was certain were empty. They were not large in this position. They had not had reason to be large in 11 years. But the anchors settled, and the membrane relaxed, and I became briefly more than I usually permitted myself to be in a beige corridor. The scanner hummed. A small green light ran the length of the panel. The man looked at the result. He was quiet for longer this time. "Can you refold?" he said. I did. He went back to his primary terminal. I watched him pull something from the file, not the standard data fields, but a linked document. He read it. He pulled another document. He read that one too. The reading glasses sat steady on his nose, and his expression had the quality of careful attention, the kind that moves slowly because it is being thorough, not because it is confused. He reached to the left side of his workstation and picked up a small printed reference card. He read the reference card. He put it down. "When was this clip record filed?" he said. 11 years ago, in the file." 11 years ago. He looked at the screen, and the procedure was performed at, he read the clinic name from the file. "That is what the record states." "Have you been to that clinic?" The old careful thing in my chest had grown very still. No. He looked at me then, for the first time since I had sat down. His eyes were gray, which I had not particularly noticed before. He had the kind of steady, assessing gaze that did not demand anything from me, not explanation, not performance, not the particular forward lean of someone who expects to be impressed by whatever they find. He was simply looking, the way a person looks when they are trying to understand something that is not quite adding up. The scan is flagging inconsistent cortical anchor density, he said. Wing anchor cortical density in a clipped Velrith Royal. The anchor doesn't atrophy the same way as in a natural low development case. It retains a particular structural signature. What the scan is showing me is a high-density anchor structure with no surgical modification signature at all. Not a healed modification, not an old one, none. I was very quiet. The clip record says the procedure was performed at the clinic I read you, he said. But the baseline comparison the chip just ran is pulling against 412 years of ONVETH biometric registry data, because that's what the system does for a named succession line. And the density profile I'm looking at right now is, he paused. He looked at the screen again with the glasses still on. It's a match, not a partial match. A full cortical anchor density match to the unmodified ONVETH succession profile. The lights in the booth were very even. Overhead panels, no shadow. Your wings were never clipped, the man said. He said it carefully, the way a person says a thing they have checked twice and are prepared to be responsible for. The clip record in your file is wrong. I had not looked at the space between my shoulder blades in 11 years. I looked at the man across the counter. There are data entry errors, I said. My voice came out steady. I had spent 11 years learning to keep my voice steady. They are not unusual in registry records. This is not a data entry error. He had turned back to the terminal and was typing something. A data entry error is a transposed identification number or a misrecorded date. What's in your file is a clip record signed by a medical officer, bearing a clinic registration code, recording a procedure for which there is no corresponding biometric evidence in your current profile. The Union Registry System has a classification for that. He read from the screen. Classification, 7A record flagged as potentially inconsistent with biometric baseline. Requires Article 6 data integrity review before any action can be taken on the flagged record. He typed for another moment. I'm flagging it. Something happened in the room that was not in the lights or the air or the beige walls. It was something in me, a small, involuntary movement in a part of myself I had taught to stay very quiet. The compact will challenge it, I said. They can respond to the Article 6 review, he said. That's the process. They have a compact privacy block they have used before for records challenges by. A compact privacy block prevents external parties from accessing a Union registry record, he said. He had found something on his screen and was reading it. It does not override Article 6 data integrity protocol. Article 6 is an internal Union process. The privacy block doesn't reach it. He looked up. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that off the top of my head. I just looked it up. He said that last sentence without self-deprecation and without performance. He simply said it as a statement of fact about what he had done. I looked at him. Why, I said. He was already typing again. Because the data is wrong. That's what the job is. The data is supposed to be accurate. If I mark this renewal and send you out of here with a clip record I now know has no biometric basis, I'm not doing the job. He glanced at me briefly, then back at the screen. It's not complicated. He was wrong about that. It was, in my experience, extremely complicated. No one in 11 years had found it at all simple. I did not say this. The notification came 22 minutes later. I was still in the booth. The man had asked me to remain while the Article 6 filing processed, in case there were secondary questions. when his terminal produced a soft alert sound and he looked at it, and then looked at me with an expression I could not entirely read. "Compact Oversight Representative," he said, "Thale Sanorvith. Requesting access to the booth." Thale Sanorvith. I had not heard that name in 11 years. He had been a junior council member when the succession ruling was issued. He was, apparently, no longer junior. "You can decline," the man said. He said it without heat, simply noting a fact. "He will file a complaint." "He can do that." He was looking at his terminal. "The Article 6 hold is already placed. It can't be withdrawn by a third party, and it can't be overridden by a complaint during active review. If he wants to file a complaint, the complaint will be addressed after the review completes." He said this with the same calm steadiness he had brought to everything else, and I had the odd feeling that he was not performing calm, that he was simply, genuinely, not alarmed. "Send him in," I said. Thale Sanorvith was a full-caste Velrith male, his wings folded in the closed position that indicated formal function. A position that was also, I had always found, a position that made the holder look as though they were gathering themselves to be difficult. His skin was the deep copper bronze of the high-caste compact line, his compound eyes a steady amber gold. He had aged in 11 years, in the way that powerful men sometimes age, thickening slightly, settling into a kind of structural authority that his actual features probably did not warrant. He looked at me. He looked at the man behind the counter. He said, in compact standard, "This record is subject to an existing compact privacy directive. The Article 6 flag should not have been placed without compact consultation. The Article 6 protocol doesn't require third-party consultation," the man said. He had a printed reference card in his hand. He held it up briefly, as though indicating that what he was about to say was not his opinion but the text of the thing. "The flag is placed when a biometric baseline reveals a record inconsistency. The protocol is automatic. I'm required to place it. The privacy directive predates your flag." "The privacy directive applies to external record access," the man said, "not to internal data integrity review. They operate under different authority codes." He looked at Thale Sanorvith with the same gray, steady expression he had used on me. "If you want to challenge the Article 6 flag, the challenge mechanism is through the Union Registry Oversight Office in Sector 4. I can give you the contact address." Thale Sanorvith looked at the man the way a person looks at a door. They expected to be unlocked and find bolted. Then he looked at me. "Cyril," he said, "in Velrith this time, not compact standard." I looked back at him. "This is not useful for you," he said. "Still in Velrith, lo, the particular register of a man who is telling you something he considers generous. The succession seat has been held by Rail on Seath for 11 years. The compact has built 11 years of governance around that line. A data review does not undo 11 years. I said nothing. The Onveth seat has already been seated. Whatever this scan shows, and I would dispute what it shows, the session is a matter of compact record. A union data review does not supersede compact sovereign succession law. I said nothing. He looked at the man. "You are a registry technician," he said, in compact standard now. "This is not a matter for your office." "The data integrity flag is exactly a matter for my office," the man said. He did not say it confrontationally. He said it the way someone says a true thing without particular investment in making it dramatic. "That's what the office does. The succession implications are not my area, that's for whoever handles compact law review. But the flag is mine to place, and I've placed it." He reached to the printer beside his terminal and collected a sheet of paper. He put the paper on the counter between us and pushed it toward me. "That's the Article 6 confirmation," he said. "The compact will receive a copy through the formal channel. The review period is 30 days, after which the finding either stands or is resolved through the Union Compact arbitration process. He paused. The scan result is attached. Column 3. I looked at the paper. Column 3 contained a biometric baseline comparison, the kind that is printed in columns of numbers that a person without training would find meaningless, and a person with any experience in wing anchor documentation would find immediately legible. The right-hand column was headed when NVETH succession baseline unmodified. The left-hand column was headed subject, when NVETH SCRAEL. Scan date today. The numbers were identical, not close, not within margin of error. Identical. Thale Sanorvith said nothing for a moment. Then he said in Velrith very quietly, "Sarah, think about what you are doing." "I am sitting in a processing booth," I said. My voice was steady. I had always had a steady voice, even when everything else was not. A registry technician ran a scan. I have not done anything. He looked at the man one more time, then he left. The booth was quiet. I looked at the paper on the counter. I looked at column 3. I looked at the numbers I had not seen in 11 years, the profile of a thing I had been told no longer existed, printed in the dark blocky font the Union used for everything. The man was typing at his terminal. "Corin Whale," I said. He looked up. I had read his name from the station tag on the booth frame, which I had not looked at for the first 40 minutes of the interaction, and had looked at during Thale Sanorvith's appearance because I had needed something to look at that was not Thale Sanorvith. WAEL, C Registry Technician Grade II, ORVAAL 7 Station. "That is your name," I said. "Yes." "You have done this before." "Filed in Article 6, he thought about it. "Twice. Once for a Cedron national whose inoculation record had a date transposition that would have flagged him for quarantine hold. Once for an Ivhari travel document that had a name error from a system migration. This is the first one involving a succession record." He said this without particular weight on it, as a statement of scale. "The compact will pursue this." "Probably," he agreed. "The review may not resolve in my favor. The Union Compact arbitration is not straightforward. Compact sovereign succession law is." "I know," he said, "or I know that I don't know enough about it to know how it will come out. That's not what I was deciding about." He pushed his reading glasses back up onto his forehead. "The data in your file was wrong. I can't mark a renewal knowing the underlying record has no biometric support. That's all." I looked at him. He was already back to looking at his terminal. He had, it seemed, said what he meant and was ready to move on to the next thing. He was like that, efficient in a way that did not draw attention to itself, that did not perform competence but simply enacted it. I thought about what he had said. "The data in your file was wrong. I can't mark a renewal knowing the underlying record has no biometric support. Not, you deserve to have your seat back. Not, the compact did something terrible to you. Not, this is a great injustice. None of the language of outrage or championship or heroism that a person who was doing something significant might use to tell themselves what they were doing. Just the data was wrong. I can't mark it." "You are going to receive a formal complaint from Thale Sanorvith," I said. "I'll pass it to my supervisor." "It may not stop there." "No," he agreed. "But the Article 6 flag will still be there when it doesn't." I looked at the paper in front of me. Column 3. The numbers that were mine, that had always been mine, that had been mine even when an unsigned clip record 11 years ago had said otherwise. "What was the clinic registration code?" I said. He looked at his screen. He read it to me. I had spent 11 years being careful not to look too hard at what had happened, because looking too hard at something you cannot fix is its own particular kind of damage. But I knew, had always known, in the way you know things you cannot prove, that the code would be wrong. The compact clinic system used a 12-character code. The code he read to me was 11 characters. It is 1 character short, I said. He looked at it again. It is, he said. He was quiet for a moment. That would make it an invalid clinic registration. Yes. Which means the signing medical officer would have been operating under a registration code that doesn't exist. Yes. He typed something. He looked at what he had typed. Then he said very calmly, I'm adding a secondary notation to the Article 6 flag. Invalid registration code on the signatory credential. That's a different classification. It elevates the review from data inconsistency to potential record falsification. He looked up. That changes the review authority. It goes to a different office. I said nothing. I'm sorry, he said, that it's going to take longer and go through more channels. That's what the classification requires. Do not apologize, I said. I said it more sharply than I intended, and then I said more evenly, you have done nothing that requires an apology. He looked at me with the gray, steady eyes. No, he said, but 11 years is a long time for a data error to sit in a file. I looked at the paper, at column 3, at the numbers that were mine. 11 years. I had been 31 years old when the ruling came. I was 42 now, and I had spent 11 years making myself small enough to fit through the forms, careful enough to keep my renewals current, quiet enough not to draw the kind of attention that gets a clipped Nationals file flagged for secondary review. The wrong kind of secondary review, the kind that made your travel status more complicated rather than less. I had spent 11 years learning not to look at the space between my shoulder blades. The lights were very even in the booth. I looked at the man across the counter. Where did you get the reading glasses? I said. It was not what I had meant to say. I had not known I was going to say it until it was already in the air, and then I could not take it back, and I did not particularly want to. He reached up and touched them as though he had forgotten they were there. My wife's, he said. She used them for fine work, embroidery mostly. The prescription is wrong for me, but I find I read better with them on. He said it without embarrassment and without performance, the way a person says a thing that is simply true. She is gone. 8 years ago, he looked back at the screen. The prescription being wrong slows me down a little. I find that useful. I thought about that. I thought about a man who slows himself down deliberately, in memory of someone who moved slowly, so that he can be more thorough, who wears the wrong prescription so that he will not miss things. You did not miss this, I said. No, he reached for the paper on the counter and turned it to face him and made a small note at the top of it, a file reference by the look of it. The chip flagged it. I just ran the comparison. He handed the paper back across the counter. Keep that. The formal notification will come through the registered address on your transit card, but that copy is yours. I took it. I looked at column 3 one more time. And then I did something I had not done in 11 years, in any room with any other person in it. I let my wings open. Not to flight extension, not to the full span that the ascent required, not to anything so dramatic as that. Just to the resting position I had let them assume in the booth before the scan, the position they wanted to be in when they were not being compressed, the position they had been in when I was 29 years old and had no reason to fold myself small. The membrane caught the light from the overhead panels, translucent, pale gold at the edges, the thin structural tracery visible like the veins of a leaf. They were not large. They had been folded for 11 years. But they were there, and they were whole, and the cortical anchors were exactly what the scan said they were. Corin Whale looked at them. He looked at them the way he had looked at the screen when the numbers didn't add up, carefully, without performance, without the particular brightness that people sometimes put in their eyes when they want you to know that they see something extraordinary. He simply looked. You can fly, he said. I do not know, I said honestly. I have not tried in 11 years, but the wings are what they always were. I was quiet for a moment. The wings are what they always were. He nodded once, then he looked back at his terminal. I closed my wings to the compressed position. It took longer than it used to, because the muscle memory of 11 years of compression was still there, and the muscle memory of opening was not. But it would come back. That was the thing about cortical anchor density. It retained its structure even when the behavior did not. What happens now? I said. The Article 6 review opens. 30 days at minimum, more likely 90 to 120 with the elevated classification. You'll need to maintain your current transit status during the review period. I'll note in the file that the renewal is pending review, which prevents it lapsing. You won't be able to travel to Velrith sovereign space during the review without a separate authorization, but your existing travel permissions stay active. He looked at his screen. Is there somewhere you're supposed to be? I thought about that. There was a labor posting I had held for the past 14 months, a transit logistics role on a mid-sized shipping relay, the kind of work that did not require anything of me that I found difficult to give. There was a dormitory bunk. There was a shift that began tomorrow morning. There is a job, I said. Can it wait? For how long? He was quiet for a moment, looking at the screen. I'd like to note an in-person address in the file for the review notifications. If you're staying in the station area for a few days, the initial review response usually comes faster. The reviewer can flag you for a direct interview rather than going through the correspondence queue. I looked at him. Is that the only reason you are asking? He looked up from the screen. The reading glasses were still on his nose, slightly crooked, and the gray eyes behind them were steady. No, he said. I'd also like to know how it comes out. He said it simply, without sentiment, without the pressure of someone who wants to be part of a story. He said it the way a person says a thing that is true and that they see no reason to be indirect about. He would like to know how it comes out, the way a person who has done careful work likes to know that the careful work produced the right result. I looked at him for a moment. There is a transit hostel, I said, on the station level. Level 4, he said. Block C, it's clean. Then I will stay for a few days. He made a note in the file. He did it efficiently, without drama, as a routine notation. Then he looked up. There's a canteen on level 3, he said. It opens at 6. The coffee is bad, but they do a decent grain porridge. He paused. If you're here when the morning shift starts, I walk through on my way in, if you want company. He said that last part with the same uncomplicated steadiness he brought to everything. If you want company. Not, I will find you or I hope to see you. Simply, if you want it. The offer, set down on the table the way the printed paper had been set down on the counter, without demand, without performance. I looked at him. What time? I said. 6:40, he said. I'm usually a few minutes late, the reading glasses. I understood this. He arrived a few minutes late because slowing down was the habit he had built around a dead woman's prescription, and the habit had become its own kind of fidelity, and he saw no reason to change it. I will be there, I said. He nodded. He handed me back my transit card and my biometric chip and my renewal application form, along with the Article 6 confirmation with column 3. He stacked them in a neat pile, the printed paper on top. The formal notification will be at the transit card address within 48 hours, he said. If anything comes before then, that seems urgent. If the compact files something that changes the access picture, there's a station inquiry desk on level 2. Ask for Whale. They'll find me. I put the documents in order and placed them in the document sleeve I carried in my coat. I stood. Corin Whale, I said. He looked at me. Thank you, I said. He looked at me for a moment with the gray, steady eyes and the wrong prescription reading glasses, and he said nothing. but his expression had the quality of a man who has been thanked for something he considers simply his job, and who finds both the gratitude and the simplicity of the reason genuinely true at the same time, and does not know entirely what to do with that. 6:40, he said. I walked out of booth 7 and back into the beige corridor. The chairs along the wall were still occupied. Different people now, a new shift of queued bodies with yellow slips. The overhead panels were still even and shadowless. The smell of the thermal printer was still faintly present. I stood in the corridor for a moment. Then in the corridor, with the new queue watching or not watching and the overhead lights making no distinctions, I let my wings open to the resting position. Just for a moment, just long enough to feel the anchors settle and the membrane release to where it wanted to be. The Velshari woman in chair 12 looked up. The Ivhari men looked up. The humans with their small screens looked up. No one said anything. There was nothing for them to say. They were looking at a woman standing in a corridor with her wings open, and what they saw was whatever they saw, and I was not performing it for them and not apologizing for it. I held the position for 3 breaths. Then I closed my wings, smoothed my coat, and went to find the transit hostel on level 4. The review took 88 days. I stayed in the Block C hostel for the first week, then found a short-term work posting on the station itself, maintenance logistics, the kind of work that did not require more than I was willing to give, and that kept my transit status active during the review period. The station was not beautiful. It was functional and beige, and had the particular quality of a place that has been designed to process people rather than to house them. And in 11 years of similar places, I had learned to find what comfort was available in the routine. The routine at Orval 7, once I understood it, was not bad. The maintenance logistics shift ran from 7 to 3. The work was movement, manifests checked against inventory, transit pallets staged and cleared, the kind of physical and cognitive combination that occupied enough of the mind to keep it from wandering into the territory where things I could not yet resolve lived. I was good with numbers. I had always been good with numbers, and numbers did not care about succession records. A pallet was either in the right bay or it was not. I ate in the level 3 canteen when the shift ended, and I read, and I slept in the Block C hostel room, which was small and beige, and had a window that looked out onto the station's interior transit level. An unlovely view, maintenance vehicles and cargo carts, and the occasional cluster of migrants in transit gear, but a window nonetheless, and light. I did not open my wings in the hostel room. I was not ready for that yet. The corridor moment had been something I had not planned and could not have stopped, and I did not regret it, but doing it again felt like pressing on something before the bruise had been properly examined. I had a careful relationship with hope, 11 years of careful husbandry. I was not going to spend it recklessly. Corin Whale worked the morning shift on a rotating schedule, not every day, but most days. He was there when the morning review notifications came in, which was useful because the Article 6 process required someone on station to confirm receipt of each stage, and having him available shortened the correspondence queue by 3 days. He was also, as it turned out, a reasonably quiet person to have coffee with, provided you accepted that the coffee at the level 3 canteen was genuinely bad, and that he would say so each morning with the mild certainty of a man who has made his peace with something he continues to choose anyway. The mornings established a shape. I arrived at 6:40 or a few minutes before. He arrived at 6:40 or a few minutes after, depending on the glasses, and he sat across from me, and we looked at the canteen and the bad coffee and the notifications if any had come, and we talked or did not talk in roughly equal proportion. I came to understand over those mornings that he had been at Orval 7 for 6 years. Before that, he had worked a smaller station in the Kethvaral transit corridor. His wife Marin had been a pattern designer, small-scale work, fabric and ceramics mostly, and she had died of a pulmonary event that had been survivable but had not been survived, as he put it, because the station they were on at the time had run a 12-hour delay in getting a physician to the residential level. He had filed a formal complaint. He had transferred to a station with better medical access. He did not tell me this as a story. He told me pieces of it in the spaces between other things, the way a person mentions weather or schedules factually, without the performance of weight, trusting that I would understand the weight without having it pressed upon me. I did understand it. I understood it because I recognized the quality of a person who has had something happen to them that they have not found a way to resolve, and who has built their habits around the shape of the thing, rather than around the hope that it will go away. The thing had the form of a delayed physician and a 12-hour gap in a record that should not have had a gap, and what he had done with it was transfer to a station with better access and file careful Article 6 holds on records that did not add up. Not because one was a replacement for the other, because they were both forms of the same habit, which was paying attention to what the data actually said. He wore the wrong reading glasses. He arrived at the canteen a few minutes late. He did careful work. He was not trying to fix anything. He was simply being accurate. There was a quality in this that I found, as the weeks passed, difficult to fully articulate and unnecessary to articulate. It simply was. He was there, steady and slightly late, with the bad coffee and the crooked glasses, and whatever had happened to me 11 years ago, and whatever was happening in the review offices, I could not see continued to be outside my control. And in the canteen, it was possible to hold that fact alongside the fact of a person who had no stake in the outcome and was there anyway. I had not had that before, not in 11 years, not since the ruling came and the people who might have been there had found the proximity uncomfortable. I did not say this to him. I was not sure he needed to hear it, and I was not sure I was ready to say it, and in the meantime the coffee was bad and the mornings were there, and that was enough. On the 61st day, the elevated Article 6 review returned a preliminary finding of record falsification. The invalid clinic registration code was traced, not by me, not by Corin, but by the Union Registry Oversight Office, which had the authority the Article 6 flag had given them, to a batch of credentials issued by a compact internal certification body 11 years ago, 3 of which had been used to file clip records for succession candidates whose eligibility was under compact political pressure at the time. Of the 3, 1 candidate had died before filing an objection. 1 had been located in Drelvoth space and had already filed a challenge through a different mechanism. 1 was me. Corin showed me the preliminary finding on a morning when the canteen was quiet and the bad coffee was steaming in the cups in front of us. I read the document carefully. It was 15 pages. I read all 15. The credential batch had been issued internally, which meant the falsification was not the act of a single person, but the act of a process, something that had been set in motion through institutional channels and would need institutional channels to address. This was, in some ways, worse than a single person. Single persons could be identified and confronted. Processes were distributed across years and roles and signing authorities, each node small enough to claim it had only done what it was asked. 3 candidates, 1 dead, 1 already in challenge. 1 who had spent 11 years filing transit renewals in beige corridors. I set the document down. That's the part that goes to Union Compact arbitration, Corin said, indicating a specific section. It's the strongest possible finding. Record falsification with a traceable credential chain. It's not ambiguous. I read the section. It says succession implications to be addressed through applicable compact sovereign law review, I said. That is still the compact. For the succession seat itself, yes, he said. The Union doesn't adjudicate Velrith succession, but the falsification finding is Union record and it's binding on the clip record. The clip record cannot be enforced going forward. Whatever the compact decides to do with the seat, that's theirs. But the flight-incapable notation in your file goes. He said this with careful specificity. What was certain and what was not, separated cleanly so I would not mistake one for the other. I looked at the preliminary finding. Rail Onseath has held the seat for 11 years, I said. I know. The compact will not simply void 11 years of succession. No, he agreed. Probably not. They'll do something, a restoration without displacement, or a co-governance arrangement, or a formal acknowledgement of the falsification without changing the seat. I don't know. It depends on who has power in the Compact Council now and what they're willing to concede. He was being accurate. He was being accurate about the part that was not in his control, and therefore not within the reach of careful work. But the notation goes, I said. The notation goes, he said. I looked at the document, at the preliminary finding, at the binding statement about the clip record, at the particular formal language that institutions use when they are admitting that something should not have been in a file. At 64 years of flight eligibility restored, on paper, in a document that bore a Union registry seal. I had been 31 years old when the clip record was filed. The notation had been in the system for as long as some of the transit clerks who had processed my renewals had been working. It had been in the system when I had last stood in Velrith sovereign space and felt the morning wind off the eastern plateau and thought, without intending to think it, that the air smelled the same as it had when I was young enough to simply open my wings and fly for the pleasure of it. It had been in the system every time I had folded myself into the compact shape of a clipped national and pressed myself through another set of forms. It was going. I do not know if I can still fly, I said. I said I did not know. That was honest. I know. He picked up his bad coffee. I will have to find out. Yes. There is a flight assessment protocol for Velrith nationals returning to flight eligibility after a medical hold. It is not the same as the ascent. It is a separate process. No, he said. The assessment station is on level 7. I looked it up. He said this with the same uncomplicated steadiness he brought to everything. He had looked it up, because it was the next piece of information that was relevant. He had looked it up the way he looked things up, not because he was trying to manage me or prepare me or make the thing easier by having an answer ready, but because it was a piece of information that would be useful, and gathering useful information was what he did. I looked at him. Corin Whale, I said. He looked at me. When the formal notification comes through, I said, I am going to go to level 7 and file for a flight assessment, and then I am going to find out. I paused. It may not go the way I hope. No, he agreed. The muscles have not been used in 11 years. The assessment may find something the scan did not. The anchors may be intact and the flight itself may not be what it was. That's possible, he said, but the protocol exists because recovery is also possible. He set down the cup, and the scan is very thorough. I looked at him for a moment. Will you come? I said. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the document on the table, and then at the cup, and then at me, and his expression had the quality of careful attention he applied to everything. Not deciding whether to say yes, I thought, but deciding what yes meant, and whether he was prepared to mean it. Level 7, he said. Level 7, I said. I have a half shift free on Thursday, he said. Thursday, then. He picked up the bad coffee again and looked at the document on the table between us. At the binding statement and the Union seal and the column of formal language that had finally, 88 days after a registry technician with the wrong reading glasses had noticed that 2 columns of numbers matched, gotten around to saying what those numbers already said. Sarah, he said. I looked at him. The scan was right, he said. He said it simply, the way he said everything, as a statement of the data, as a thing he had verified and was prepared to stand by. He was not giving me something. He was confirming what was already true, the way you confirm the calibration of an instrument you trust by running it again on the same sample and finding the same result. The scan was right. He had run it and it was right, and he had done what was required with the knowledge, and now it was 88 days later, and the numbers still said what they had always said. The morning light came through the level 3 canteen windows. Not good light. Not the kind of light that made things beautiful, just station light finding its way through the scratched transparency of commercial windows, flat and ordinary and reliable. I thought about a morning 11 years from now, or 5, or 2, or perhaps 1, when I would know the answer to what I did not yet know. When I would have stood in a flight assessment room on level 7 and let the anchors do what they were built to do, and found out whether what the scan said, and what the cortical structure said, and what the numbers in column 3 said was also what my body said when I finally asked it. I thought about the beige corridor, where I had let my wings open for 3 breaths. I thought about a man who arrived a few minutes late every morning because the prescription was wrong, and slowing down was how he paid attention. "Thursday," I said. He nodded. Outside the window, the station moved around us with the particular purposeful indifference of a place designed for people passing through. Queue numbers were called, forms were processed, data was entered. The records accumulated, each one a small decision about what was true. In booth 7 down the hall, the morning shift was running. The data was accurate. I picked up the bad coffee, and I drank it, and the morning went on.